Jetzt vielleicht noch einmal Bescheid sagen, dass es losgeht, oder? Okay. Hamira, you still hear me? Ah, okay. Good. Cool. So we're starting now.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, great. Okay, so welcome everybody to our online discussion event with the title Big Promises. Where is the fund for loss and damage? This online discussion is the final part of our three-part online discussion series on the critical topic of climate justice overall. And you're, of course, also very welcome to watch the first two episodes as well. They're available on YouTube. You can find them over the website of Aktionsgemeinschaft Solidarische Welt, ASW. Yeah, I will now give you a short introduction to the topic. So we all know that climate crisis causes damage, and this damage is increasingly very, very visible. When, for example, a cyclone destroys a village, when people are displaced due to sea rising levels, or when crops fail, when climate crisis causes damage, who's responsible for that? We are. And we, in that case, meaning industrialized nations that emit large amounts of greenhouse gases, such as CO2, into the atmosphere. This imbalance is the foundation for the idea behind the Loss and Damage Fund, which was agreed upon at the 2021 International Climate Conference. And this compensation fund was celebrated as a breakthrough. But last year, a group of nations, including the US and the EU, made the first financial commitments, but still to this day, not a single euro has been paid out. So at the climate conference in Baku, countries most affected by climate impact spoke about an annual need of around 1.3 trillion by 2023. That's 13 times the current level of what's being pledged. In our discussion event of today, Big Promises, where is the fund for loss and damage, we'd like to discuss the long-awaited fund. Why is it taking so long to create one? And what kind of natural disasters does the fund cover? And how do those affected experience the situation? Our event is hosted by Aktionsgemeinschaft Solidarische Welt e.V. and funded by Engagement Global with support from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, short BMZ. And yeah, their support gives us the amazing opportunity to meet Hamira Kobusince today. We were supposed to have a second speaker with us, Sebastian Lesch from the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. He sadly, due to personal reasons, couldn't appear today, but I'm pretty sure that we will have a very interesting time with Hamira Kobusince. My name is Irma, I'm just moderating, so I'm happy that everybody is here. Yeah, so to you, Hamira. Hamira Kobusince is joining us online from Uganda. She's the 18th Freeman Solidarity Prize winner and founder of Climate Justice Africa, which is a collective based in Uganda. And she'll be able to offer us perspectives on grassroots advocacy and the real-life experiences of communities on the front lines of climate impacts. So yeah, since it's only the two of us, Hamira, I will just ask you some questions, and please feel free to elaborate if you want to tell something more. So you are a climate activist in Uganda. Could you tell us a bit about your activist work in Uganda and about your collective, Climate Justice Africa?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on this panel. Like they said, my name is Hamira Kobusince. I am a climate and gender justice activist, and I am from Uganda. I also founded the organization called Climate Justice Africa, and this is the main reason we exist is to build resilience through information and also bridging the gap between policymakers and communities. And we do that in different fields by educating the communities, but also by representing these communities and amplifying the voices of young people in these communities, and also making sure that every community is being represented. And that's what we also do when we try and educate and build skills for grassroots actors and young activists, but also when we go to school to teach children about the existing crisis and the climate change and the topics being talked about climate change, but also bring back information from conferences like COP and what is being discussed at an international level to our communities that we represent, and also show these communities how what is being discussed at an international level affects them and how they should take advantage of the policies being discussed, but also where do we go from here? Because at the end of the day, much as the discussions are made at an international level, it's the communities at the grassroots that are being affected. It's the communities that are being displaced. It's these very communities that are actually facing the actual brunt of the climate crisis. So however much we sit in conferences and discuss for them, if they do not have the information and if they cannot tap into what is being discussed and the opportunities availed, then politicians and governments then tend to actually divert these funds if there's money that comes in for different funds, adaptation, mitigation, and it's diverted to different sectors, but also for the ones who are doing something at the grassroots levels, the grassroots actors, they get to tap into the resources, the knowledge, and then learn from other countries that are doing way better than their countries, and other countries that have built different kinds of resilience around the climate crisis.
Yeah, I think resilience is a very important thing in the whole thing. And as you said, education and representation are unavoidable in that. Maybe since you are in Uganda, maybe you can tell us also again what are the main threats that Uganda is facing through climate change, like in the last years, but also in the future.
Come again, sorry.
Can you maybe tell us what are the main threats that Uganda is facing due to climate crisis? Like what has been happening in the last years that has affected your country very much, and maybe also what can happen in the next few years?
Well, Uganda faces climate challenges that deeply affect people, economy, and environment. These include unseasonal flooding that destroys homes. We also have destroys farmland, destroyed infrastructure, exacerbating economical pressure and gender inequalities. And also this does not just affect the environment itself or affect immediate, it has lasting, and it also crops into existing things that have happened. Insecurity. You find that there is increase in dropout of girls from going to school. It increases child marriages. It takes us back to fights we had actually survived for some years. So we find that even things like domestic violence increases. There's a hunger crisis. There's displacement of people. People lose their homes. And 2 weeks back, there's a road that was blocked. A whole bridge was blocked due to flooding in my country. And until now, people have to pass a different route and that is the shortest route to go from different places, transport produce, transport children to school, and all these things. People know how to go a different route that is really very far.
Yeah.
And this is what I think when we talk about the climate crisis, this is what we mean. Like it does not just destroy and floods and we end there. It cripples into the different parts of our lives. It cripples into our day-to-day lives. And we find ourselves being stagnated. Infrastructure is destroyed. And then my country majorly depends on tourism and agriculture, which 2 industries entirely majorly depend on having a good climate and having saving the environment and having good nature and everything. And when there's erosion, that means crops are destroyed. When there's flooding, that means farmers cannot transport their goods to the market. Hence, we have a lot of food wastage, and we also now again have starvation because now the regions that have food cannot transport it to the regions that actually need food. So it is, and then we have landslides. Let's not forget to talk about that people lose their lives in these crises. We have lost children. We have lost people due to the climate-induced crises. We also have had a whole village destroyed because of landslides, and we also have had floods where people's crops, and so the crisis does not just affect, and we say a flood happened. We do not just say a landslide happened. There's so much life and so much that goes with it economically, financially, socially, and people are displaced, livelihoods are destroyed. And then also even development is destroyed, because now if a road is destroyed, it has to be rebuilt, it has to be reconstructed. That is more money poured in the wrong direction instead of being invested in the right places. And also instead of looking forward to us developing, probably one day getting into the developed nation sector.
Yeah, thank you very much for that explanation. I think it's very important to hear over and over again that climate crisis does not only cause like floodings that have like harsh consequences, but can maybe be rebuilt, but only affects like areas as gender injustice, child marriage, and starvation, and that what you say that people of course tend to forget that people are actually dying because of climate crisis. Maybe coming to the loss and damage fund, what you explained already, I think kind of categorized in the categories of loss and damage. So I think it's pretty clear. There's not really a clear definition of those words, but like you can say that loss is those things that are lost, like that cannot be brought back, right? And damage is things that are so damaged that they need a lot of effort to rebuild. So maybe can you explain to us what the idea behind the loss and damage fund is?
The idea behind the loss and damage fund is to help communities, countries, and least developed countries in this case, and the ones that are most affected by the brunt of the climate crisis, to recover and rebuild during the existing crisis. But also, the goal is not to just recover and rebuild. We have had so many countries, mine included, that every time there's a crisis in my country, the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness has to rush to IMF or has to rush to banks to actually borrow money for us to actually recover and rebuild from a crisis that has been induced by the climate crisis. But let's not forget that my country, Uganda, contributes less than 0.0005% of global CO2 emissions. And also as a continent, as Africa, we contribute less compared to the most developed countries. So it is unfair that we have to incur more debt. It's unfair that we have to tap into our money that we should actually invest in developing our countries, in building financial development, in probably making sure that we also grow as a country, making sure that there's different infrastructure, that we invest in IT, we invest in the things that help countries grow, and then we reverse that money into recovery of loss and damage for a crisis we actually did not cause, for a crisis we have not contributed to. Now, why are we talking about loss and damage? The reason loss and damage should be there, we should actually understand that the main reason even for COP29 happening, and I'm going ahead of myself here, but the main reason for COP29 being termed as the climate COP is because we wanted to have a three-pillar financial system where there was adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage, which helped us that while we adapted, there was also mitigation because we need to phase out. We should also remember that loss and damage finance alone is not enough, but we need it to be able to make sure that at least we are not incurring more debt, one. Two, that our communities are recovering and we are rebuilding, and at least there's funds for that sector to be for that to be dealt with. Least we may find ourselves needing to invest in more fossil fuels, and which is cheaper. I mean, which is a faster way of getting money. It's not cheaper, but it's faster to get money, and that becomes unfair to the road towards climate action. It becomes washing your clothes and hanging them in the mud, because then you're not doing anything. The reason we have a loss and damage fund, or the reason we are pushing for loss and damage is because we failed to act in time and act right. And right now we are trying to act, and still we are contributing so little, and it's too late at the time where we're acting. So I don't know. I hope I answered your question, but I could clarify. Yeah.
No, I think it's very clear to understand that looking at climate crisis, it's pretty clear which countries caused more of the crisis, and that this is not the countries who suffer the most under it already. And so the Loss and Damage Fund is an idea to create more climate justice, or it's a step in that direction, right? And do you feel like it can be a good first step towards more climate justice? And is there another step that you would like to see taken?
Like I said, Loss and Damage Fund is a very good step towards climate justice, because also we should remember it has to be equitable and instant implementation. It's not something that we have to drag around. The fund has to be available to actually help those communities, because let's remember the Loss and Damage Fund is there to help developing nations and nations that contributed little or so little to the climate crisis. So it helps those communities that have been affected. Like I said, a whole village was destroyed in my country when the floods came, and also another one when there was landslides. And this is all climate crisis. Now imagine these people have lost their cattle, they have lost their plantations, they have lost their children, they have lost their roads, they have lost their lands, they have to migrate. The least you can do is at least avail instant funds for them to actually recover from what has just happened to them. It's not doing a lot, but at least it's helping to soothe and help them get back on their feet instantly, compared to if we probably just sit back and let them be. Because let's not forget, when these communities were doing well, they were contributing to taxes in that country. When these communities were doing well, they were employing different people, so they were contributing to employment. When these communities were doing well, and the people who were farming and doing all these things in those communities were actually doing great, and there was mobility was easy. It was easy to take your children to school. Their children were going to school. There was school. There was hospitals, there was all these things. And if they're destroyed by a tragedy like flooding or like landslides, which happened so much in my country, it is only fair that there is equitable distribution of funds, and there is somewhere we can run to get these funds to help these people jump back on their feet. It's only fair that these people actually get access to these funds to at least help them rebuild, and not just relocate to a new place and start from zero. Actually, not starting from less than zero, because now they have gone back to negatives. They have lost, and which is a very sad thing, because we are really trying to adapt to a crisis we did not create. So when I hope I answered your question, but I feel like yeah, it helps us, and it helps us to soothe and nurse our wounds when a crisis has happened, and there's funds to help us out of it, especially if it has happened due to a climate-induced crisis.
Yeah, of course. Yes, thank you very much. I think that was a very clear statement. And so you were talking about different scenarios of catastrophe caused by climate crisis. So we know that the likeliness of climate catastrophes happening is growing all the time, so it will not really get better in the close future. So we do know that not only extreme weather events are getting more likely and more intense, but also the consequences that they bear. And we know that from the latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. And if we now look at the more technical issues of the Loss and Damage Fund, there is talking about what types of natural disasters need to be covered by the fund. So because they are trying to define what should be covered and what not. Do you feel like that this dividing is helpful, and do you feel like it would make sense to exclude some kind of disaster from the fund? Or do you feel more like it is very connected with each other and maybe hard to differentiate?
Well, if you ask me as a humanitarian, I would tell you it's unfair if we are excluding some disasters from the loss and damage fund, because it is not fair for countries to that, like, again, we have to look at the cyclones, we have to look at the countries that are facing droughts, facing desertification, all these countries. It is unfair to say that all these crises, you cannot say we're going to say we are probably going to give funds to a country because there was a cyclone and not give to funds to a country because there was probably flooding. I feel like all these climate, I think for me, it should be climate-induced catastrophes. All climate-induced catastrophes should actually be able to access the loss and damage fund because, like I said, we do not cause a climate crisis. We are facing a crisis we did not cause, and it is not fair if you say that one crisis is more valuable in terms of being funded than the other, because one thing these crises have is they destroy lives, they displace human beings, they cause suffering, they cause death, they destroy environments, they destroy economies. All this is what climate-induced catastrophes do to communities. And that is what we want to actually work on. And if you say crisis is more valuable than the other crisis, then that means that the countries and the communities that are facing these crises are being discriminated in the face of a brand, in the face of suffering. And I feel like once it has climate-induced on it, it should be funded by the Loss and Damage Fund. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like you make the necessity of this fund very clear. And also, I personally now understand very well why it would be a good step towards like more justice, more climate justice. So I wonder, since the Loss and Damage Fund was first agreed upon at the 2021 International Climate Conference, it was first agreed to actually pay out any funds, and it was very much celebrated as a kind of breakthrough. And still it is taking very, very long until something actually happens. What do you think? Why is that?
Not to play the blame game, but one is developed nations are stalling, and they keep saying they need to establish this, establish that. There's also bureaucracy involved. There's, of course, there's the technical bit where they're trying to set up the board and everything and how it's going to run and all that stuff. But I feel like if we go back into bureaucracy, it's the same thing we're trying to fight when we move away from the previous funds like the GF, the previous funds like the Green Fund and all these funds that have existed before the Loss and Damage Fund, is we're trying to run away from bureaucracy for actually communities to actually access this money instantly, to be able to help them, but also not to just for communities, but to make sure that the funds in the Loss and Damage Fund are accessed by communities that are actually being affected and not just governments like the previous funds have been doing that. And I feel like this is a disservice, but we should also not forget that developing countries are playing a very huge role in dragging this out and delaying it. And they keep saying they're still figuring out the fund's operational model and stuff. And I feel like that is playing a huge role, but also let's not forget that there's even less money. The money needed for Loss and Damage Fund is estimated at $5 trillion US. And what we have is a sprinkle of a drop in the ocean, and it's not even enough to like take care of the losses in my country, and my country is actually not a very huge country. Now imagine a country like Pakistani that is still dealing with the brunt of the floods that happened in 2022. Imagine a country like Malawi that is still dealing with the brunt of the floods that happened 2 years consecutively. Imagine the same thing happening in a country like Nigeria that is also suffering the brunt of drought and flooding simultaneously. Let's not forget South Africa. Let's not forget the island states. And that's what I'm trying to say, like the money is not even being provided. And it's really sad because we have also seen that developed nations rush to invest in war and in all these things that contribute to even in fossil fuel lobbies, all these things that contribute to the climate crisis, but they drag their feet when it comes to providing funds in the loss and damage fund. And this is also delaying it. I think it even becomes hard to build a fund without funds when you're trying to say we need a board, we need this, we need that. And we really hope that the meeting that is happening in April will actually determine when the funds are distributed, but we also hope that there's more funds added to the fund and developed nations don't drag their feet in providing those funds, because that is what is delaying us. Even if the board decided today that they were disbursing of funds, those funds are not enough for all the countries and communities that have been affected by the climate crisis this year alone. Like I'm saying, this year alone, and not even considering the years before. That's what we're trying to say, that the money is even not in the fund and the developed nations are dragging their feet. So I feel like before we even look at the system and everything, there should be money provided in the fund. But also, we should also remember that bureaucracy is the reason the other funds became very hard to work with. And we should now make sure that this fund is user-friendly for communities, for young people, for women, for disabled people, for all the demographics that actually need to access this fund, beyond just governments and beyond just politicians and all these big entities. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So that was a lot of information. I'm just trying to come to a next. No, don't worry, it's fine. I mean, it's very interesting and it's very important to understand. So it is a wide topic. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel that you're having a hard time to understand why it is so difficult to invest money in this fund, whilst it is so easy for a lot of countries of the global north, or European countries, to invest a lot of money in other things like fossil fuels, weapons, wars, things that actually harm, like cause harm and not reparation. Okay, so based on that, like if we pretend that there was a lot of money in the fund now, what would you like the fund's administrators to do to ensure that communities and recipients countries can autonomously decide what to do with the money?
It's interesting. I have so many answers to that question, but I don't know where to start from. But if I was to answer that question very fast, I would think it's the same thing I said. So many times money comes to governments, and when it gets to governments, that money actually is diverted to different sectors, like probably constructing roads, like constructing dams, like all these things that ignore the actual needs of the community and the actual issues of the community. And for me, I would really want the loss and damage fund and the money that comes from that fund to be excluded from all those things, but focused on the affected communities, focused on the communities that have faced the brunt, focused on rebuilding and recovering of these communities, focused on making sure these communities heal from the trauma that has been caused to them through the climate crisis and the different catastrophes that have happened in their communities. And if that is done, I believe that we shall have communities that, one, have built resilience, two, communities that have actually know what is tailor-made solutions for them. Because again, when you construct a road or a dam for these communities and ignore the fact that they need water, or ignore the fact that they actually need to have irrigation systems, or ignore the fact that they have to rebuild and see how to survive the next flood if it's to come, or to see how to actually survive through and probably think of a new way of farming, a new way of cattle rearing, a new way of surviving and coming up strong and all these things. And then you invest in something you feel like will help the country but will not help the communities, then we are going back to zero. We have seen so many communities that have invested in bridges, and now the bridges are flooding because they did not invest in building resilience in the communities. And so if you ask me, how would I want the fund? I'd want the fund to be accessible for grassroots actors, the people that are in the communities, the people that have been able to help these communities without the money, or to build resilience in these communities without the money, and how will those people use the money? But also, I want something I think I've talked about before, is I would really want to have to listen to these communities, and how do they first respond when the floods happen? How do they, I know I have talked to some, but my authority goes only so far. And I would really want the world to know, how do they respond in the brunt when it happens immediately? And how would they need to be resilient? Would they need to recover and build strength and be able to grow? What helped them in that time when that was happening? And then we also invest in that. But also, the loss and damage fund should be accessible to local governments and to local communities and different stakeholders in those communities. And I feel like if it's possible, yes, governments can access that money, but there should be ways of making sure that communities, people at the grassroots, people that have lost and need to rebuild and need to recover and know what are the tailor-made solutions for when the flood happened, for all these things. Those are people that actually I would love to see them access that money, because, and even that fund should actually leeway for women and youth and disabled people to have a way of accessing this fund. There should be trainings in communities. There should be all these things so that we build from down to up and up to down. What do I mean by building up to down? While the communities are recovering and building resilience, they're also innovating, they're also learning, they're also growing. And while negotiators and all the people that the participants that go to these conferences discuss and figure out these things, and while all these beautiful things are being created, we should also understand that while we create something huge for the world and think it's a solution, we should remember that there's a small community that needs something small for it to actually come to appreciate the something huge. So many times there's so many policies that have come up and I'm like, this policy is not good for this community because this community doesn't understand. And every time we give a solution to a community that doesn't need that solution, then that becomes wasted money and becomes a wastage of so many things. So I think I have said so many things, but if I am to conclude, I would really like the fund to address local communities and local governments, and it should have local communities, local governments, and local grassroots actors access these funds to help rebuild and recover, and the recovery of these communities.
Yeah, thank you. That that was very clear in the end. So I think so we know that we have this high imbalance between the contributions of high income and low income countries, where we talked about that already. And as you said, to look at solutions, it is very important to keep in mind that there's like big plans, but that you should always look at the places that they are supposed to take place. So because people in one place will probably always know the best how to deal with the place itself. So if we're talking about responsibility, especially looking at the industrialized countries of the global north, is there something else that you can think of what they could do to act upon the responsibility they have because of the damage they caused? And is there something else but the loss and damage found that they could do, or do you think it would be very important to just push for that? And also in general, how important do you think is money in creating more climate justice?
That's actually, those are like 3 questions, but I'll answer them in bits, and they're really beautiful questions. It's no secret that industrialized countries have contributed the most to the climate crisis, and developing countries have actually contributed so less. For instance, my continent alone contributes less than 4% of global CO2 emissions. But one thing that should be learned is loss and damage alone is useless. A loss and damage fund alone is useless. But we need to adapt, we need to mitigate, and we need to have a loss and damage fund. Mitigation helps us have just transition and move away from fossil fuels and the destructive way of living that we have already been accustomed to. Adaptation helps us change and improve on our ways of living and build even resilience in our own communities, and know how do we move forward even with this happening. How do we twitch our lives a little bit to actually make sure that, one, we protect the environment, but two, we ourselves are safe and we have a livable environment. And loss and damage is recovery, like we talked about. But let's not forget about the science around climate change and global warming. We have carbon sinks, and we have sinks for greenhouse gases, and we have sources. Whatever we do, whatever we discuss, wherever we go, we should remember one thing, that the goal for us as human beings to make sure that our planet survives and our planet moves on in a healthy way is for us to grow the carbon sinks. The carbon sinks are land, water, all these things that consume CO2 and help us rebuild the planet, and the things we actually move on with. The oceans, the water bodies, the land, the soil, the forests, reforestation. Forests help us help the soil hold, and the soil holds CO2 in return. And only soil that is held by the roots of trees can consume enough CO2. The same thing with coral reefs in the ocean, the same thing with mangroves in the ocean. And let's not forget that right now we have so many sinks, so many sources that pollute the environment, our consumption, the road systems, the fossil fuel investments we have, the different minings. We have war of lately. Everywhere you look, there is war happening, and there is destruction of infrastructure. There's destruction of nature and the planet itself, with all these really intoxicating I don't know what ammunitions and stuff that is used in the war. And this is all destruction to the planet. But for there to be even a glimpse of us saving the planet, we need to grow the sinks, but also we need to reduce the sources of the destruction of the planet. And this can be done by adapting, by mitigating, and by recovery, which is loss and damage. And one, if you say you're going to adapt without mitigating and without recovery for communities, then you're doing a disadvantage, and then you're going to lose out some communities. And with globalization today, there's no country that can live without the other. There's no community that can live without the other community. Like, we have gotten to a point where we depend on each other. Africa depends on Europe as much as Europe depends on the US, and as much as US depends on Asia. And the same thing happens all over again. It goes again. And same thing, we depend on the Caribbean, and the CO2 the Amazon takes in to helps us to actually keep going for a few more years and keep believing in and keep fighting more, a little more. The same thing happens with so industrialization has, globalization has become a really huge thing that we depend on each other. And in the same system, that is how climate change and nature happens. We depend on different things. That's why you see that there have been, much as I hate carbon markets, it has been able to be sold out, because then there is a belief that the trees I plant in Uganda help combat the CO2 in Germany. But that is not enough if we do not phase out of fossil fuels. That is not enough if we do not change and reduce our consumption levels, and be more loving to the planet and to our Mother Earth. So we need to remember that we need to grow the things. I mean, yes, we need to grow the things, and we need to reduce the sources of emissions. That's one. And then you asked, is money important in the fight towards climate justice? Yes, money is important, because there's nations that have developed at the cost of other nations through industrialization and consuming the ozone layer more than other nations. And now that other nations are trying to develop, they are limited because we are developing at a time where we are also trying to save the planet. That means we cannot develop with cheap and more accessible sources of energy and more destructive sources of energy, like the nations that developed before us did. There's an issue of colonialism. There's an issue of, so all these things show that for developing nations to actually keep developing and not just be destroyed in a fact where we try, in a time where we're trying to, one, develop economically, develop socially, but also protect our Mother Earth, we are going to need finances that are not generated within our countries. We're going to need finances that have been generated by countries that contributed way back to the climate crisis that countries developed. So countries like Germany, countries like France, countries like the UK, the US, all these countries developed from industrialization, from colonization, from all these things that hindered countries like mine from developing. And if these countries can tap, because I know countries that actually operate on surplus budgets, and then there's a country like mine that operates on a deficit budget. What happens if those countries actually contribute to the 3-pillar climate fund, which then helps these countries like mine invest in more renewable energy that is not going to contribute more to the destruction of the planet? And that is where the money comes in. Least we're going to have to find ways of developing, or countries like ours are going to find ways of developing in the same destructive measures that the countries that developed before us did. And we do not want that, because if we do that, then we are destroying the planet more. We are destroying our home more. There's no other inhabitable planet than planet Earth for the rest of us. And the weird thing is, a few years back, we were the only ones facing the brunt. It was only the developing nations that would be like, the climate crisis is happening, and it wasn't felt. Right now, we're at the stage where it's undeniable. The climate crisis is happening everywhere. In Germany, there is flooding. In Spain, there's flooding. There is cyclones in the US. There's heat waves and fires in the UK. It's undeniable. So we're at a time where we need to act. Are we late? Yes, but it's better to act now and act right. The only issue we have is developed countries, I think, feel because they have built an adaptive system that works for them, it will keep them safe forever. We cannot adapt forever. That should be noted. At some point, something is going to destroy us all if we do not act now.
Yeah.
And if we do not act effectively and equitably.
Yeah, I think that you cannot say that often enough. And of course, I mean, just to take a short summation of that, it is very clear that the the level of adaptation is depending on the level of damage. So whatever adaptation measures we take, we still need to reduce the damage, because if we're not reducing the damage, we will never get out of that the situation we got ourselves into. And I think you elaborated a lot on a lot of topics, and I feel like there's a lot of important things in that, and I'm sure that we will be able to point them singularly out again. Just to stick with the topic of money for a second, Germany, for example, is reported to be the largest donor for addressing loss and damage, with around 1.2 billion provided since 2010 for over 180 projects benefiting more than 45 million people in countries most affected by climate change. That's a lot of numbers. Do you think that Germany is doing enough already? And besides that, or maybe just that, is Germany doing enough already? Do you think that?
Thank you. One is Germany is not contributing loss and damage fund that much. It has only, I think, contributed 100 million, which actually was just a pledge into the loss and damage fund, because the loss and damage fund was only enacted, I think, last year at COP28.
I think it's two areas. It's like it's the loss and damage fund pledge, and then it's it's
adaptation
money
and everything.
I get you. Loss and damage as a topic, right? Yeah. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So money paid for loss and damage as a topic is actually very, very little from Germany. That what has been contributed is like a drop in the ocean. Is it true that Germany contributes more than other countries and more than other industrialized countries that have actually contributed most to the climate crisis? Yes. Is it enough? No. And I feel like if, for instance, if I told you, I'm looking for a very good metaphor, but if I told you there's food, but it can only feed one person, but at least I gave you food, and then you're 10 people, have I given you food? Because then that's not enough food if it can only feed one person, and even that one person won't be satisfied, and then it leave the other people hungry. What am I trying to say? Germany is doing a great job, and we appreciate it. But compared to where Germany puts more money, and I mean money in fossil fuels, money in sectors that destroy the environment, money in war, and where it distributes its money, I feel like Germany can do more because it has the funds to actually contribute and give actual money and not just pledges like it does with the climate change and the climate action three-pillar analogy. Let's say adaptation, loss and damage, and mitigation. I feel like Germany could do more and it could do better. That's one. As we talk about that, we also, other countries also need to do more and they need to do better. But I feel like while Germany does that, it is also contributing to, it's not being a very good big brother, if I want to use an analogy. I feel like Germany has self-acclaimed climate action leader, and it has led a very good, but it's actually not doing a good job. I feel like it's doing things to, not for solutions, but for to be like, well, at least we are doing better than the US, at least we are doing better than the UK, and I feel like that alone is not enough. We need to do more, and I feel like even during the negotiations, Germany is not represented as Germany, it's represented as the EU, and also being Germany, it has a very big voice in the EU. That means it should also push other countries to actually contribute more money and contribute more into the fund. But also, there's more to be done. There's more to be done, and at this point, I think Germany should understand that, as a country, should understand that we are doing something, but we need other team players, because the destruction is only not destroying one country, but it's destroying everywhere, and we need to act now. Yeah. And what am I forgetting? Yeah. I think I have tried. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I feel like, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Yeah, concerning climate crisis, it's not really a competition where you can like be happy about yourself if you're better than someone else, because in the end it's still about winning like altogether. And looking at the efficiency of of climate action, it is pretty clear that more countries have to do more. And just maybe sticking with the example of the loss and damage fund, we see that it's not enough countries that do enough and that participate enough. So do you think that there is something that could be done to ensure that more countries participate in that fund in a way that is convenient? Because maybe to add, I think there were a lot of people before that thought, because you talked before about that climate catastrophic events are now also happening pretty clearly in Europe and in the US, and it's very visible. And I think a lot of people thought that if that happens, those countries will act more intensely, and that clearly isn't the case. So I am wondering if you think that there is still something that people could do to make it more likely that those countries participate in this fund.
I think if there's something, one, we can talk more about it. And one thing I have noticed is countries are pushed to talk more about something if more people talk about it and if more people push them to do it. I feel like just like I speak for my community, and I also speak to our leaders about what they can do for our communities, and I also speak to different people in different delegations and different hierarchies about what should be and what needs to be done for the climate crisis. I think we should not stop talking. We should not stop spreading the word. We should not stop involving more communities. We should keep pushing, and we should keep trying our best to get our governments to act better and to do better. And I think also in that line, we should also educate our communities better. One thing I have noticed, especially in giving the example of Germany in this case again, is I have noticed that much as the government is giving money, they go back to communities that be like, why did you give money? We need money here. And these communities are not educated on why Germany is giving this money. And then the problem comes in when they think Germany gave a charity, yet they actually are contributing to this money was promised in the Paris Agreement. So this information has to be spread out. We have to make sure that at least everybody knows about the climate crisis and that it's happening and it's coming at a very high speed. It's no longer a deniable issue where slow happening, like slow happening incidences like desertification, like it is in Africa, but it's now cyclones that actually destroy whole communities and real human lives. It's now floods that come in one night and communities are washed away. It's now landslides that claim schools and claim children while they're in school sleeping. It's now heat waves that kill people on the streets while they move. It's worse. It's now melting glaciers and raising sea levels. It's shrinking water bodies, for instance, in Lake Victoria, in my country. So it's all these things happening. And like I said in the beginning, it needs to be information that is available. You need to walk to someone on the street and they need to know about the climate crisis. They need to know the impacts of the climate crisis. And when this information is provided and everyone knows about it, it will, I think policymakers and the leaders will actually act fast when they receive pressure from their communities, from their citizens, and from the people in their countries. I think they will act better. I think they will even have nowhere to run because we pressurize as civil society in these COPs, and also back home they're being pressurized to do the right thing. I feel like we could move some footsteps in ahead, because at the end of the day, we need to protect the planet. We need to make sure that the people that come after us at least have a livable place to stay. They don't have to always live under purified air. They don't have to always live under the AC because we burnt the planet and now it's too hot for us to survive in. The planet has to be livable in without actually using artificial intelligence or using artificial creations, man-made creations like purifiers and air purifiers and stuff like that. We have to be able to walk out on and feel like we're at home. We feel like we are safe. We cannot continue living in a life where we don't even trust our environments themselves. We cannot be there and be like, oh, maybe today I'll wake up under the water. And that is the life that is being lived in communities in our countries, like my country. And if we understand that, then we'll understand the magnitude of how fast we need to react and how fast we need to improve.
Maybe
I feel I'm emotional about this, but yeah.
No, I think that's something that maybe people who are listening can also take home very well, because just to summarize a little bit, that the world that we have is very precious and very endangered, and that nobody really is safe from that, even just because they're living in a specific place or something, and that it's very much needed to build up pressure in order to make powerful people do the right thing in a way.
Just to contribute, like I don't know, I'm sorry, I forgot, not forgot, but I feel like it would be nice to say this. When I started out as a climate activist, it started as it started with me alone knowing about the climate crisis, and everyone around me didn't know what was happening to us. Like the brunt was happening, the crisis was happening to each one of us, but like even myself, I didn't know so much. I had to go and learn and read and break down this information. But after I learned it, I was so disappointed that no one actually knew about it. Everyone was denying it. But then you talk to someone a little bit more, and they're actually facing the climate crisis. They're facing the brunt of the climate crisis. And when I think about this, I feel like now, 4 years down the road later, I feel like everyone around me knows about the climate crisis. I did my best. If you didn't know English, I had to translate it to a language you understood. And now I am even training people who speak even more languages than I do. And they're talking to their communities. And I feel like this is where we start from. It doesn't, and then in a country like German, where everyone speaks two languages, English and German, it even becomes easier to spread this information. In a country like Spain, where everyone speaks Spanish, it also becomes easy to actually move on this language, this information. And then I feel like it starts with making sure that the people around you actually know that the climate crisis is happening, and they have to be able to be doing something about it, and be probably holding themselves accountable. And that's what I do with my friends and my family. And I feel like if everyone did that, it would move us a mile towards climate justice. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very helpful to remember, and something that's very easily can be done for everyone. Maybe to find an end with our discussion part, I have one more question for you, and then we have a couple of questions from the audience, just so that you're also a little bit orientated. So to maybe also find some confidence in the whole thing, that is very, depressing. Like as a positive example for loss and damage found, Malawi is one of the few places in the world. Malawi is one of the few places in the world. Is it not? Okay, don't worry. I'm just starting again so that you can hear me well. Malawi is one of the few places in the world that has shown how the loss and damage fund could work. The country was one of the first to receive funding for climate-related damages. This didn't come from the main fund, but it was directly transferred from Scotland. Scotland is part of Malawi's former colonial power, the United Kingdom. And Scotland's then First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, pledged 2 million for loss and damage at the 2021 climate conference in Glasgow. And I wonder if examples like this, which happens in a more like, I'd say, not private context, but more like organized in smaller groups, do those examples give you some confidence that a loss and damage fund will actually become reality sometime soon, since it's taking a long time already?
First of all, let's thank the Scottish government, the first non-state actor, to commit to and deliver on the promise of funds for loss and damage. This was in Glasgow when developing countries wanted the funds, and still we were given a dialogue about why we needed the funds and stuff. The fair and just fund for responding to loss and damage should be based on upholding what countries committed to, and at least in the governing instrument in Dubai, the fund is accessible to all developing countries and direct access to countries to support their fit for purpose response mechanism on loss and damage, and as there will be no size fits all, and it should be a fund with a predictable source of new and additional adequate finance sources. No rebranding of the climate finance commitment or development support as loss and damage are beyond that. That's what I have been, I think, talking about. And also it should be a fund that is transparent and accessible and liable for both developing and developed countries, to enable the ability to know that we are all moving forward to addressing the climate crisis as equal partners, or as the same are in the same boat. And why am I saying this? Because it feels like we are limited to the fact that the loss and damage fund should only be put in like only governments and stuff. And when non-government actors contribute to this fund, it actually helps us know, or helps show us that money is not supposed to just come from governments. Anyone can contribute to the loss and damage fund. Anyone can provide these funds, but also that instant money helps different communities. And also, I think I lost you at some point. Please repeat the question so I see if I'm answering the right question.
The question was if the example of Malawi and Scotland gives you confidence that the loss and damage fund will actually happen sometime soon. Also, I mean, I'm also interested in the fact if you think that it will happen at all.
Well, the loss and damage fund is going to happen. The problem is, will it happen with the efficiency, the equity, and the justice we need? Will it be a just fund? That's the question. Will it be? Will it have money? Will it not be one of those?
Yeah.
Dealing with it? Will it be a fund that segregates communities? So that is the question. That is the place where we're at. But the loss and damage fund is going to happen because board of directors, I mean, the board has been set up already. There is all these discussions. So in April, we probably will have a first disbursement. But what we are fighting is to make sure that it's equitable, is to make sure that it has money. And it's even disappointing that at COP29, we failed to actually have money allocated to the loss and damage fund. Even the outcomes of the so-called finance COP are very disappointing for communities that I represent, at least. And like I said in the beginning, the estimated money needed for loss and damage is 5 trillion. But at COP, at least it was negotiated to probably a compromise of 1.2 trillion. And that is money we could present and be like, okay, now that there's this money, we should move forward, we should do this, we should do that, there should be mitigation, there should be adaptation, there should be loss and damage. But then we ended up with developing countries getting their way again, because again, we are stuck in a place where it's easy for the developing countries to get their way in this place in these conferences, and it's really heartbreaking because the 300 billion that was suggested at COP29 is if you ask me, it's, I don't know, it's really small money, and that's the issue we have. The issue is, will there be money in the fund? Will the fund be just? Will the fund be equitable? Will the fund be functional? By functional, I mean, will people at the community levels access these funds? Will women access these funds? Will young people access these funds? Will disabled people access these funds? That's what I mean. Will the actual affected communities access these funds?
Yeah.
But the truth is the fund is going to be there.
Yeah.
How do we use the fund is the question.
Yeah, I think that's a very solid answer to the question. So there's going to be a fund, you think, and this is the questions that are still open. Yeah, thank you for answering my questions so detailed and with so much information. That was like super helpful. I learned a lot, and I think everybody else too. There's like now 3 more questions that I got out of the audience. I will post them to you, and maybe you can answer them shortly. So someone was wondering, what do you think about the countries that have suffered loss and damage due to climate change having to apply for support from the fund? These countries are also taking the transaction costs or the bureaucracy involved. And do you think that there is a better solution for this?
Like I said, I feel like there's a better solution. I probably haven't gone deep into the solution. How do I feel about that? Those are the things we have been discussing about and trying to probably.
Maybe you can also connect it. Maybe I can also give you the second question because I feel they are very interconnected. Okay. The second question would be, what are your concerns about the current structure of the fund? So maybe you can take them together.
Okay. There is still so much to be done about the current structure of the fund. And I think as civil society, we have and are still trying our best to swear that the fund is just, the fund is, countries don't have to incur more money to actually access the fund. And the truth is, how I feel is it's not fair that this is happening, but also we need to, and I feel like I am speaking like someone from the global north right now. Right now, we need to probably put our hands together and try to advocate more and push more, because till now, someone was arguing with a negotiator from, weirdly, from Germany the other day, and they were saying, how about you have like small money, but at least it's instant, instead of having like the huge money, but it's not instant. And much as we want the fund, we also want a just fund. And I think that's how I feel about what is happening right now. There's the body is still there, and it's sitting, and we are probably waiting for what comes out from the 50th board meeting in April. And then hopefully it's good news. And but with the way things are looking, it's already seeming like the global north is swaying towards what they want, and then giving us really half-baked solutions and unrealistic or solutions that actually don't fulfill the reason why the funds were created in the first place. And tapping into my feelings, that's a sad feeling to feel, because it makes you feel helpless. And we are trying our best to make sure that the fund is debt-free. We're also trying our best, and by trying our best, I mean like civil society and as an activist and advocating, and also trying to push for support for the people who are actually in these rooms, trying to push for the betterment of this fund, especially from the global south, and not letting the global north get its way again. And at the end of the day, we have to, I think it's, when you ask me how I feel, it's me asking you to join your voice to my voice to at least make sure that this fund is equitable, and this fund is not a fund that pushes countries like mine into digging a grave in the debt hole furthermore, because as we stand right now, my country is drowning in debt, and it's not fair enough. It's not fair that even the loss and damage fund that is supposed to help us recover and rebuild becomes another fund that we have to borrow from, or another fund that is actually inactive but existent, or another fund that has no funds. So at the end of the day, we need money in the fund. We need the fund to be equitable and just. And hopefully you join your voice to mine, and we keep pushing for this. It's yeah. And there's so many young people who are trying to push for a just loss and damage fund.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's always important to remember, that it's not only damage getting caused, but also a lot of people who try to change that. And do you think that the fund, is there a way that the fund could ensure that the resources of the fund reach the most vulnerable communities first?
Well, do I think, again, I do not influence the fund. I can only influence the fund by being by advocating for the things I believe in, and those are justice and equitability. And for me, how do I feel like the communities, the affected communities, can benefit from this fund is by making sure it's accessible to grassroots actors and to the actual communities and to local governments, because it's the local governments in these communities that know what their communities need, how their communities can move forward, and how their communities can recover better and effectively. And so basically what I would think is probably making sure that even organizations at the grassroots, even civil society, can access these funds. And these funds are not just directed to just governments, but they're also funds availed for civil society. And this civil society are grassroots actors again. I know there's big organizations, there's organizations that look like, okay, they're doing a great job, but they're big organizations. And some of these organizations do not get to the grassroots. The same thing with governments. When money comes to a government specifically, the government determines where that money goes. But when money comes to a local government and to local communities, then those communities have the chance to tailor-make how they recover, and to tailor-make how they rebuild their community and how they build resilience in those communities. And for me, I feel like that is the perfect loss and damage fund, and that is the loss and damage fund I advocate for. It should be debt-free. It should be accessible to all most vulnerable communities, to the vulnerable communities, and to women and disabled people and young people. There should be ways of making sure that these groups of people can access that money efficiently and equitably and in a just way. And I repeat, the fund should and must be debt-free. We cannot dig a deeper hole for debt again.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out so clearly. I might come to the last question for you. this is not so much specifically about the fund, but more about the general situation with climate crisis. And also you described a lot about also your personal situation and the situation in your country and the global south, and about the damage that is being caused right now. People are dying. There's a lot of injustice being reinforced that has been better before. So how do you see hope within the climate activism that you do and the climate activism that is being done by others also?
Please ask again.
How do you manage to find hope within the climate activism that you do and that others do?
Thank you for that question. So I remember when, anyway, I think I've had so much anxiety and depression over the years, and I felt like I wasn't doing enough, and I felt like my voice was small. And I think I talked to someone and they reminded me that you're not in this fight alone, you're not doing it alone. You have friends in Europe, you have friends in the US, you have people in Asia, you have people in the Caribbean, and the voice is unanimous. It's one voice. We need climate justice, we need climate action. We need to move forward in a just way. And the fact that also the communities I represent, I see I see like change and rebuilding, and I see resilience that has grown day by day. It helps me, I think, feel strong, and it helps me go forward, and it helps me keep moving, because even when conferences like COP drain you and you feel like you're fighting a losing battle, and you always like something wrong always happens at COP, and it's really disappointing, and it really drains your soul out. It still reminds you that at least you're doing something for your community, at least you're adding your voice, at least the story of your community is not going untold. And the more voices, this is why I keep saying, the more voices we add to our voices, then the noise will be loud enough to be undeniable. And if the noise is loud enough that it cannot be denied, they will have no choice but to act right. They'll have no choice but to do the right thing and to try and protect the environment. It's already heartbreaking that we have people that are not sure or do not, I don't know what they're, I don't know. My feelings are all over the place, but the goal is, I think the thing is, I am happy that I am an activist, but also a grassroots actor. And even when I am really disappointed in what is happening on the international spectrum of climate action and climate talks, at least there's significant impacts in the communities I represent, in the young people I impact and I train, and in the different lives that Climate Justice Africa actually touches, and which is for me a reassurance that I'm doing the right thing, but also a reassurance that there's hope that we can save the planet, and there's hope that we can live a safe and livable planet for the generations to come, and not, at least we are the generation that has decided to save our planet. And if our voices are loud enough and in uniformity, we can see change and we can see a difference.
Thank you so much, Amira. So let this be maybe the last word for this discussion we have today. So maybe to give a short summation for the end, so that everybody knows what to take home. So we were talking about the fund for loss and damage, and I think we learned from you a lot. You shared a lot of your knowledge and your thoughts and your hopes with us, which I am very grateful for. And I think it's important also, yeah, to take home that we probably will have this fund sometime soon, but that there still is a lot to be done in shaping the fund in a just way, so that it can actually help to create more justice. And to always remember that the damage that climate crisis causes is not something that happens in the future, but that is happening already, and it's happened for some time before. And that it is causing actual death, and it is creating more injustice and it destroys things that already have been achieved in matters of justice. And therefore, it's always important to remember that what you said, the generation that everybody is, that is alive, has a lot of power in changing the situation we're in, no matter where they are. So that the Loss and Damage Fund is a very important step to climate justice, and it will be very good to have that. But it can never be enough, because as long that there's damage, no fund will be able to cover the damage that keeps growing. So I hope that everybody can also go home with some hope and courage to maybe talk to their friends and their family and find some ways to engage, maybe putting pressure to people to create a fair loss and damage fund. I would also like to thank again the ASW, Aktionsgemeinschaft Solidarische Welt e.V., who allowed us to create this event. And it was funded, as I said in the beginning, but never, I say it just again, it was funded by the Engagement Global with support from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. And there's 2 more episodes from the same series online. You can find it in YouTube, and you can also rewatch this session in YouTube. So I hope everybody has a great evening, and we will see us again.